Thanks, Chris. What I want to touch on, I guess, is probably a bit more discussion than a presentation. It would appear that resistance is real. We do have it, and as growers and as producers and as technologists in our fields, that's probably the first thing that we have to accept. Denial, and that was a word that we heard very much last year when we toured the States to look at some problems. Denial was the word that came up quite regularly, in that the growers, agribusiness personnel, etc., were in denial that it could possibly happen. In their situation, not a lot different to our own situation in Australia, in that reliant almost entirely on a very, very good product. In that situation, glyphosate. Glyphosate for the Australian situation is probably also very important to our farming systems. We've had, and I've had an agricultural career, along like many of you, where glyphosate's been the product that we've controlled weeds with. We're at that situation now where we're coming unstuck. Into the cotton industry, are we in a good situation or are we in a bad situation? There's two crops in Australia at this stage where we're now able to, I guess, proliferate the use of that product, not just from our fallow, but we've changed it with the advent of technology from a non-selective fallow product to essentially now a selective in-crop product. That's a very big turnaround, and no doubt it's technology that is very, very welcome and has done a fantastic job. I just wonder whether we need to consider how we utilise that going forward, that we don't accelerate some of the issues that we may have there. There's a whole host of other technologies and other, I guess, mechanisms to control weeds. As an industry, they're things that perhaps we shouldn't forget about. We don't want to go back to the past, but in some situations there's probably some components out of the past which for management going forward are very, very important to us. I think in any resistance modelling situation and in any work, it comes down to breaks, and some of the things that Jeff touched on is survivor control. Resistant weeds don't appear as an entire field on the first day. It's proactivity when on that first suspicion. So again, survivor control. No matter, I don't care how you do it, whether it's a chip hoe, whether it's our swarm farm robotics in the future to do it for us, or whether we actually man up and do it ourselves. But survivor control in the first instance is very, very important in longevity. If we look again at the models, if you're able to take out seed production, and whether that be from preventing seed set with double knocks, or whether it be the introduction of a cultivation into the system to prevent survival, has a huge effect on the number of times before we start to come to problems. So I think there's some of the things that we need to consider. Do we go the same way as the states of trying to correct a problem by using some more of the same medicine that caused the problem? That's probably our temptation, because that's the way we've been accustomed to travel in modern agriculture. But is it the correct way to go? Jeff's example there just before of Group A's, I was in a different forum yesterday where Group A's were also mentioned. 4 to 6 years was put up there as the likelihood between use and resistance. 4 to 6 years. That's not very long. So, is it wise in Australia to substitute a Group A, which is selective grass herbicide, in situations where glyphosate has failed on a grass weed in crop or fallow? I'm just not that sure that that's a very smart thing to be doing. In the use of residuals, we were, I guess, as an industry, very excited when we were able to use glyphosate as a selective in-crop herbicide because of the frustrations and unreliabilities of residuals in our farming systems. The success of that product may very well drive us back to the very place that we came from and didn't want to be. But at the end of the day, that may be what's required. Diversity of tactics. And again, in any weed forum I've been to, and any scientist that I've spoken with, the secret comes down to diversity. And it doesn't matter what system or what biological system we operate in, the minute we start to rely upon one tactic for intervention in that system, there is only one outcome. We saw it several years ago in our own industry with synthetic pyrethroids. We saw it even prior to that with DDT. It's nothing new. Unfortunately, good products, we tend to flog them until they come to bite us. Let's not do the same with glyphosate. The challenge is there. I want to open it up to some questions and discussions. And as growers and producers and scientists, where do you think we should be going to try and address the issue? Do we accept that resistance is in our fields? Show of hands. That's step one. And that's I think that's a very important position. We've accepted that we may have resistance, or we do have resistance possible. So we've gone past denial. The next step of that, and the next important one, though, is what do we actually do about it? How do we attack it? Do we rely upon modern science, which is probably trait-driven in the current environment? Do we see that as the successful mechanism we need to overcome? If we go the trait mode, what traits are that we actually need for our Australian cropping situation? That's a very important question, I guess, that as CRDC, as Tim's committee, as proponents in the industry, there's some of the answers that we need to try and give us a lead as to where we should be going in the future. Because outside of the traits, we probably have a limited tool bag. And we saw from Jeff's list there, again, the point was brought up at a different forum yesterday. It was 1982 or thereabouts was the last time that a different herbicide group was introduced to the Australian herbicide market. 1982. That's a long time ago. So relying upon future developments may not be the success, or may not be the answer to the issue that we're looking for. where do we think our problems are? Do we believe that the proponents of some broadleaf herbicides, is it broadleaf that we think is going to be a major issue for Australia, or is it grass weeds that we think are going to be our major issue? Where do we think we should run? Do we simply rely upon herbicides and try and develop new mechanisms to overcome that with herbicides alone, or do we go back to a more integrated weed management solution where herbicides are just one of the management tools that we use? They're all things, I think, which we've got to give very serious consideration to, and probably sooner rather than later. Because the sooner we react into an integrated weed management system, I think the later we can postpone that time to when our products become non-effective. And science may not actually find the solution for us tomorrow. Management may actually be the solution that we need, but it's actually here today. They're probably the thoughts that I'd leave to and leave it for questions. Thanks, Chris.